Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mish Minds. This is the place where we break down the world's most impactful books, chapter by chapter, every single day. And today, wow, we are kicking off a brand new journey into a book that's honestly a modern spiritual classic.
So, if you were with us for our last series, you know we went deep into the psychology of money. We talked all about how our minds, our thoughts, totally shape our financial lives. But that got me thinking, if our thoughts have that much control over something like our money, what kind of power do they hold over, everything else? Our happiness, our peace, our very sense of who we are. And to answer that massive question, we're diving into The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Okay, so before we even get into the ideas of this book, you really have to understand the guy who wrote it, and more importantly, the incredible suffering that led him to write it. See, this isn't just some academic theory. This book was literally born from a life-or-death personal crisis.
And when I say suffering, I'm not talking about just having a bad day or a tough week. For Eckhart Tolle, up until he was 29 years old, his entire life was defined by this stuff. We're talking almost constant anxiety, crippling suicidal depression, a feeling of just hating the world, and a sense that everything was completely, utterly meaningless. That was his baseline reality.
And then, one night, just after his 29th birthday, everything hit a breaking point. That constant dread, that suffering, it suddenly became more intense than anything he had ever felt before. It was one of those moments, a moment that was either going to completely destroy him or change everything.
This was the thought that just started looping in his mind, over and over and over. I cannot live with myself any longer. Just imagine that for a second. But then, right there in the middle of all that despair, something shifted. He started to notice how weird that thought actually was.
And it led him to this absolutely mind-blowing question. Hold on. If I can't live with myself, does that mean there are two of me? There's the I, and then there's the self that the I just can't stand anymore. And that begged the biggest question of all. Which one of them is the real me?
And get this, he was so completely floored by this realization, this simple but incredibly profound question, that his mind just stopped. It went completely silent. He was totally awake, fully conscious, but for the first time in his entire life, the thoughts were gone. That constant mental chatter that had tortured him for decades, it just vanished. So what came after that silence? You might think it was just emptiness, right? But no, it was the exact opposite. It was a way of seeing the world that was so beautiful, so profound, it was like he was literally being born for the very first time.
So he wakes up the next morning to the sound of a bird chirping outside his window, and he says it was like he had never truly heard a bird before. He saw the first light of dawn coming through the curtains, and to him, it wasn't just light. He felt like it was love itself. Everything he looked at, even simple things like a pencil or an empty bottle on a table, seemed fresh and pristine, just pulsating with life. He walked around the city that day in just utter amazement at the miracle of it all. He was seeing the world without that negative, anxious filter his mind had always put on it.
And this wasn't just a quick, fleeting moment of peace. This is the part that always gets me. For the next 2 years, he basically just let go of his old life. No job, no real home, none of the usual identities we cling to. He spent most of his days just sitting on park benches, completely lost in this state of incredible joy, just watching the world go by without judgment. Can you even imagine that? 2 straight years of uninterrupted peace and presence.
Well, after a while, people started noticing him. They'd see this guy on a park bench who just radiated this incredible sense of peace, and they'd come up to him and ask, "How can I get what you have?" And his answer to them, that's what slowly turned into the book we're about to explore together.
And his answer was so simple but so powerful. He'd tell them, "You have it already. You just can't feel it because your mind is making too much noise." Think about that. The peace, the joy they were looking for, it wasn't something they had to go out and find. It was already there, right inside them, just buried under all the static and chatter of their own minds.
And this is really important for how we're going to approach this book. Tolle says he didn't write it just so you could understand it with your head. He really sees it as a tool. It's designed to actually pull you into that state of presence while you're reading it. He even puts these little pause symbols in the text, basically telling you, hey, stop reading for a second, just sit with this, feel the truth of it. It's all about the experience, not just the information.
And that's exactly what we're going to try to do in this series. We're going to travel through this book chapter by chapter, not just to understand the concepts, but to really see if we can experience what he's pointing towards. So what's the very first step? Well, Here it is. The single greatest obstacle to enlightenment is identifying with your mind. And that's the core idea of Chapter 1. The problem isn't your mind. Your mind is an amazing tool. The problem is that we've mistaken the tool for who we are. We've become completely lost in that voice in our head.
So we are going to break down exactly what that means and how you can start to notice that voice in our very next explainer. If you want to join us on this journey every single day, please make sure you subscribe to Mish Minds and give this explainer a like. It honestly helps us so much and lets us keep making these daily breakdowns for you.
And hey, we're always on the lookout for our next big read. So drop a comment below and let us know what book has really changed your life. But as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. A single, simple thought. I can't live with myself. Completely transform one man's world. So, what thoughts are running your world right now? We'll start digging into that tomorrow in Chapter 1. Thanks for being here.